Alright, pinion and axle housing assembly. You're going to start with part number A1 and one number A3. A3. We're going to do this 3 times. These are all the same. First, you need the bearings or the bushings. The kit comes with these brass bushings. I'm going to go ahead and replace those with the 5x11 bearings. One bearing gets pressed into the center, the axle there. Another one on the output. Your pinion gear slides right on through. Pull it through, and then install the E-clip, just like that. Alright, onto the differentials. You've got to build 2 of these. You start by taking the star shaft and your 3 spider gears. Just put some grease on the shafts and install the spider gears onto the shaft. Looks like this. Just slide them right over. Next, you're going to need your 9mm washers or shims. I'm going to put one over the bevel gear like that. And then you want to drop that into the housing, like so. Bevel gear facing out, like that. Your spider gears go on top of that. If the shaft fits in those little slots, on top of that goes one more bevel gear, your shim or your washer, and then the cap. When you're putting this together, make sure you apply grease to all the gear surfaces and all the shaft surfaces and those washers, and then 3 screws. Make sure you apply thread lock to all the screws in the differential cover, so they don't back out on you and you don't have to tear your axles apart to fix it. Now this step you're going to do twice again. Grab your differential and your axle shafts. You're going to have 2 different shafts. One is going to have a pin and the other is going to have a hole. On the axle shafts, on both of these, on that knurled end there, you're going to put one E-clip. Okay, and you're going to grease the shaft a little bit, slide your bearings over, one, then a second bearing, and then another E-clip. You're going to end up in an assembly like this, with E-clip on the end and 2 bearings, and then another E-clip on that in that ring. I'm going to take both of these and your axle housing. The side with the cone gets the shaft that does not have the pin on the end. Goes right in, and the other shaft that does have the pin goes through the other side and into the other axle housing. Now you've got your axle and functioning differential. Now to assemble the axle housings, you're going to need to take for the first axle with both input and output shafts. You've got A1 and A3, and then the other axle with a single input, you've got A1, A2. Okay, now for each axle, you pick up 1/2 here. Make sure you apply grease to the pinion gear inside and to the ring gear on the differential. Differential is going to sit in the pocket right there. Make sure your bearings fall into the pockets for the bearings near the differential and at the end of the axle housings. Should roll smoothly there. Apply grease to the other pinion on this axle. The other axle you don't need to, because there's only one pinion. Put them together. You've got pockets for your nuts. 8 pockets, 8 nuts, and your 3 by 15mm screws. Come through the other side, tighten all 8 of those screws. The axles are now assembled. You want to put the drive cups onto the pinion shafts. The one axle is going to have 2, and the other is going to have a single one. So you go do this 3 times. There's a flat on the shaft. You want to take and make sure the set screw hole lines up on the shaft on the flat spot. You're going to use thread lock on your grub screw or your set screw, and tighten it down really good. And then when you're done, make sure you apply a little bit of grease inside the cup. Alright, now we're going to attach the axles to the frame. Lay the frame upside down, facing away from you. Grab 4 suspension brackets. They're going to be attached to the axles. Now the front axle goes towards the front here. You can have the double output shafts. The front side of the axle is going to be the one that has the screw heads, not the one with the nuts. Drop 2 screws through the bracket, facing the front here, and through the axle. The differential is going to be on the right side of the frame here, if you're looking at it, not the left side, the right side here. And go ahead and screw those to the brackets that are already mounted to the leaf springs. Okay, now for the back rear axle, again, make sure that the front of the axle has the screws. The differential is going to be facing on the left side this time. You have to make sure these are there. You got to pay attention to that, otherwise one axle is going to drive forward and the other will go backwards, and that's no good. Again, take your brackets, 2 screws, and mount these facing the rear through the axle and into the brackets on the springs again. And then go ahead and tighten those screws down. Now to attach the radius rods to the axles, pay attention to the part numbers here, because there's 2 different numbers. On one side you're going to be putting F7 on the front and F6 on the back, and on the other side it's going to be F6 up front and F7 on the back. Now where you mount the radius rod to the bracket on the frame here, you're going to use your 3x18 step screw, and also serrated lock nuts. Show you here on the one side here. Again, the other part number, step screw through the frame, serrated lock nut. Now you can use thread lock on those if you'd like. On the other end of the rod, you're going to use a 3x14 step screw, and it's going to go through the bracket on the axle, through the rod, out the other side, and you're going to use your 3mm lock nut. Okay? You're going to do that on both sides of the frame, front and back, left and right. Right, but before you actually attach it on the back axle, make sure you flip it up and slip the dog bone in place, and that's going to drive that rear axle off of the front axle. Alright, now to mount the shocks. Okay, you're going to need your shock brackets, and it's got a pin. It's going to go in one hole of the frame, and your screw is going to go through the other hole. Use a 3x15mm screw, and you put your shock bushing through the shock, Screw through there and through the bracket. Now that's going to mount that whole unit, that bracket, right to the frame there. Use that pin to help locate it. And then the screw goes in the threaded hole. On the top, use your 3x14 step screw and attach the shock to the bracket there, and use a lock nut on the back side. And tighten it up, tighten that down. On the back side, same thing with your shock bracket, bushing and screw, and mount it right back there. Okay, and now that the rear shock is mounted, go ahead and turn the frame around and do the same thing on the other side. Now here we have our fully assembled frame, front and rear suspensions, all your servos in there ready to go. Next, it'll be on to the transmission.